Synergistic effects of keto and intermittent fasting. Introduction. The ketogenic diet and intermittent fasting, both unique in their approach, have garnered attention for their distinct benefits in weight loss and health. The keto diet, a low-carb, high-fat regimen, has demonstrated its potential in reducing disease risk factors and aiding in weight loss. However, the combination of this diet with intermittent fasting in an Indian context, where the prevalence of type 2 diabetes and obesity is high, remains an underexplored area of research. Intermittent fasting, an eating pattern alternating between fasting and feeding, is a powerful tool for weight loss and has a protective effect on the brain, especially in old age. Its flexibility allows individuals to adapt it to their lifestyle, making it a manageable and effective strategy for promoting weight loss in overweight and obese individuals. When combined with the ketogenic diet, intermittent fasting can produce similar effects as caloric restriction. This review aims to examine literature and practices on the ketogenic diet and intermittent fasting, identify areas of synergy, and understand their impact when combined. This understanding can empower individuals to make informed dietary choices daily. Background and rationale. The ketogenic diet was initially developed as an epilepsy treatment. Not all patients can adhere to a 90% fat diet, so using a ketogenic formula for pharmacological ketosis may be beneficial. Long-term consumption of a low-carb, high-fat diet leads to ketosis. Ketones act as brain fuel when glucose is limited. A ketogenic diet intentionally induces ketosis, a state similar to starvation. Intermittent fasting includes various fasting cycles and must be interpreted flexibly. While the ketogenic diet and intermittent fasting are popular dietary approaches individually, their combined effects have yet to be extensively studied, especially with increased ketone bodies. Fasting triggers adaptive responses, contributing to health benefits, and intermittent fasting shares similarities with ketogenic diets. Understanding whether these combined effects differ from the individual effects and how macronutrient processing occurs without dietary ketones during fasting is crucial and warrants further investigation. Enhanced fat burning. Going keto increases the body's ability to burn fat over glycogen by adjusting carbohydrate intake to limit glucose availability. At the same time, intermittent fasting depletes stored glycogen, allowing for the transition to more significant fat mobilization and subsequent fat burning after utilizing the body's glycogen stores. The physiological changes in the body during ketosis result in reduced insulin levels. In response, fat cells release adiponectin, a hormone that signals the release of stored fatty acids. At the same time, increased lipase activity in the fat cells help break down triglycerides into fatty acids. Once they have been freed from the fat cells, fatty acids are released into the blood. The liver rapidly oxidizes the fatty acids to fuel other tissues in the body. Alternatively, fat can become partially metabolized into ketones, serving as brain fuel. During a fasted state, the body, in a way, mimics some aspects of a keto diet by mobilizing fatty acids from stored body fat. Glucagon and cortisol levels rise as insulin levels and glycogen stores decrease due to skipped meals. As glycogen stores plummet and insulin and blood sugar levels drop, fatty acids are released from fat cells. The liver undergoes a process called beta oxidation, in which fatty acids are metabolized into ketones that can be used to fuel the brain and other organs. Blood flow increases to the areas that house the most body fat, boosting the release of free fatty acids from those areas. Another hallmark of fasting is that there is no insulin-mediated inhibition of hormone-sensitive lipase, meaning that even more fatty acids can be liberated into the bloodstream instead of burning dietary fat for energy. The evenings also generally decrease in core body temperature, aiding fat oxidation with an uptick in fatty acid release from adipose tissue and a decrease in free fatty acid breakdown combined. Fasting results in advanced rates of oxidation of fatty acids, in other words, greater fat burning. Both groups lost the same amount of weight. Still, who ate a low-calorie keto diet experienced a more significant increase in energy expenditure, primarily due to the increased cost of gluconeogenesis, which is a substantial portion of the energy expenditure of the liver per day. This discrepancy in energy expenditure between the two groups over time may have started right from the beginning, with the keto eaters experiencing more excellent free fatty acid release into the blood. In this way, through the mechanisms of gluconeogenesis, the liver acts as a fat-burning organ, converting the free fatty acids into glucose. Following a keto diet plus fasting, the fuel source becomes ketones. Often, individuals who adopt a keto diet combined with fasting notice more significant fat loss than those who only fast or adopt a keto diet. The thinking here is that if the body accesses ketones from dietary fat and stored fat, fast-tracking the time it takes to get into ketosis could lead to more fat burning during the low insulin environment that ketosis and fasting generate. The key to enhancing fat burning is to keep metabolism and thyroid function running efficiently to ensure steady weight loss, since chronic calorie restriction can decrease the basal metabolic rate, making fat loss cells more difficult to achieve. Adherence and personal lifestyle also play a critical role in the long-term effects and efficacy of fasting or keto dieting on fat loss. For some people, doubling down on these individual strategies may make fat loss feel more sustainable and comfortable. Mechanisms of accelerated fat burning. This synergy can be explained by specific metabolic mechanisms through which keto and intermittent fasting contribute to accelerated fat burning. One key substrate that supplies energy during fasting and mimics fasting benefits is beta-hydroxybutyrate, BHB, one of the molecules from fat during ketosis. As the primary circulating ketone body, BHB is effectively oxidized and metabolized in cells to prevent cellular energy production from fueling fat oxidation and fat trimming to glucose. BHB also accelerates ketosis and thereby beta oxidation, the catabolic metabolism of fatty acids in mitochondria. Beta oxidation is pivotal to enhanced rates of fat loss. The increase in lipolysis per se does not elevate fat loss. Still, incorporating insulin response at fasting, especially after the low carbohydrate diet, composed of less glucose disposal, would have increased the release of free fatty acids, FFAs, from fat stores. The reduced insulin levels during the fasting phase also contribute partly to the elevation of glucagon, releasing FFAs into the blood, so BHB only increased the glucagon to insulin ratio from low carbohydrate. Furthermore, chronic short-term fasting and a low-carb diet have demonstrated a metabolic and adaptive response to lower FFA concentrations and reduce fatty acid turnover and excretion to raise liver FFA influx while preventing systemic lipotoxicity. During low-carbohydrate intermittent fasting, FFA influx into the liver exceeds total output. However, the cumulative increase in FFA levels leads to more fat release from the liver to oxidize, thus contributing to the intermittent fasting value that is increased from low carbohydrate. The process behind the adaptation and mechanisms leading to the increment in fat utilization were not analyzed in the current study. However, it is proposed that lipophagy plays a pivotal role during accelerated fat loss in low carbohydrate intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting and ketosis, low carbohydrate intake, increase autophagosome numbers. This change in autophagic function helps the liver effectively manage fatty acid metabolism. This increased rate of fat oxidation immediately, and especially at 5 hours after a mixed meal, highlights the shift in energy storage and fuel utilization for energy metabolism to promote healthy lipid metabolism and weight management in individuals following low carbohydrate intermittent fasting. Physiologically, this process implies that intermittent fasting induced increased hepatic energy flux and provided a mechanism by which energy was successfully managed. The potential roles of increased autophagy through altered autophagic function, a decreased rate of lipogenesis, or the interaction of both await further investigation. Other recent reviews and studies have highlighted the potential for low carbohydrate intake to impact weight and lipid metabolism within a few weeks significantly. Consuming 50 grams of carbohydrates at breakfast reduced the area under the insulin curve in obese participants. Still, the short-term mixed macronutrient increased the total fat oxidation rates below that observed during a high carbohydrate mixed meal control. Reduced de novo lipogenesis contributed to the beneficial mediation of hepatic energy metabolism. Still, it did not have a detectable effect on energy intake. The results of the current study include LPCs and changes in intermediate lipid metabolism markers to hypothesize potential mechanisms that partially explain FFA metabolic responses. Metabolic flexibility. When focusing on an individual's overall health in a clinical or lifestyle approach, metabolic health is critical. This broader topic includes characteristics such as insulin sensitivity, the storage and oxidation of fat, inflammation, and many others. Combined with a bunch of these processes is the idea of metabolic flexibility. In simplest terms, it refers to the ability of the body to switch from being a sugar burner to a fat burner, and essentially to switch the primary fuel sources from carbohydrates to fats. Since our primary sources of calories come in carbohydrates and fats, metabolic flexibility is essential for our body to choose which source to use and store the other for times of scarcity. Fuel flow through the different carbohydrate and fat storage pathways and fat oxidation under normal conditions helps regulate energy balance. When fat stores are metabolized, satiety responses increase as fat oxidation acts as a feedback to indicate that carbohydrates have been successfully stored for energy, preventing their overflow into fat stores. Like the ketogenic diet, metabolic flexibility is defined by low carbohydrate flow, generally known for its ability to lower insulin levels and sustain body fat oxidation, preventing fat from being stored. Another route to metabolic flexibility is through intermittent fasting. Here too, low insulin levels, supported by not consuming energy, generally promote fat oxidation. Moreover, when breakfast meals are excluded, metabolic flexibility is directly raised through increased and sustained fat oxidation. When the body learns to skip meals, the energy that would be tasked with energy intake, absorption, and storage can instead be focused on energy expenditure and improving performance during physical activities. Operating under these physiological conditions can affect individuals differently for numerous issues, such as gender, weight, activity patterns, genetics, and more at any time. However, metabolic flexibility constitutes a necessary component of metabolic health, and over time can contribute to preventing weight gain. Enhanced fuel switching. Eating a ketogenic diet suppresses insulin levels and postprandial glycemia. It reduces glucose availability, facilitating the transition from glucose to fat oxidation. Due to high rates of fatty acid release, hepatic production of ketones is substantially accelerated on a fasting keto dietary protocol. The rate at which blood ketones rise during fasting has been termed the keto adaptation period, typically occurring after 2 or more days of fat fasting. The presence of elevated blood ketones allows for a rapid reduction in the body's reliance on glucose, shifting instead to the non-esterified fatty acids derived from adipose tissue and ketone bodies as fuel sources. In the ketotic state, ketones can be a supplementary fuel for various tissues, including the brain, liver, muscle, heart, and kidney, via oxidative phosphorylation and citric acid cycle activity. Furthermore, daily intermittent fasting increases tissue sensitivity to insulin. It enhances non-oxidative glucose disposal following fasting, reducing insulin release and lowering overall glucose oxidation. Enhancing fuel switching via nutritional practices may elicit multiple beneficial effects in diverse populations. For example, professional athletes adhering to a low-carbohydrate, high-fat diet have demonstrated increased fat oxidation rates at high exercise intensities and improved time trial performance after several weeks of training. Furthermore, blood ketones have been shown to confer cognitive benefits and extend maximum lifespan in animal models. A study of endurance athletes found that those with more excellent fat oxidation rates displayed advanced markers related to fat metabolism, including increased mitochondrial content. These data suggest that fuel use inefficiency can ultimately lead to positive metabolic adaptations. The accumulation of evidence suggests it can also support fat loss success in overweight and obese individuals by allowing them to utilize their endogenous fat stores more effectively. Improved insulin sensitivity. Given the fundamental role of insulin sensitivity in overall metabolic health, increased insulin sensitivity represents the shared physiological mechanism resulting from the combination of both ketogenic diets and intermittent fasting strategies. This combination is exceedingly beneficial whether or not chronically high insulin hypersecretion is a significant problem. Several clinical studies over at least the last half-century have shown that adding periods of keto to other dietary interventions increases weight loss and improves other chronic diseases such as diabetes. This synergy between keto and fasting is a direct consequence of the beneficial effects of each, working through partially interrelated mechanisms on insulin action and other hypertrophic hormones. Insulin sensitivity describes the pathways that allow insulin to act similarly to a smaller amount. Insulin can be enhanced by intermittent fasting and low carbohydrate intake using specific metabolic pathways. The glucagon dominance that occurs with carbohydrate intake stimulates insulin clearance and helps reduce fasting insulin. Reduced insulin secretion in response to exogenously injected glucose or meal-based carbohydrate ingestion is also associated with improved insulin sensitivity. This has clinical relevance because insulin resistance, characterized by reduced insulin-stimulated glucose disposal or diminished anti-lipolysis, is a primary driver of and a strong predictor for clinically significant metabolic diseases such as obesity, insulin resistance, diabetes, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, polycystic ovarian syndrome, metabolic syndrome, and cardiovascular disease. A transient increase in fasting insulin is expected during the early adaptation period of a keto diet. It is not associated with metabolic harm as long as glucose levels are normal. The relationship among fasting insulin, insulin sensitivity, HOMA-IR, and blood glucose is dynamic in individuals with insulin resistance. It may not follow the mechanical relationship shown in clinical studies. The long-term benefit of enhanced insulin sensitivity is the prevention and treatment of metabolic diseases. The ideal intervention with the highest likelihood of influencing disease causes creates a healthier metabolic state, leading to long-term health outcomes. Ensuring an evidence-based approach emphasizes our knowledge of the mechanistic pathways linked to better health. Insulin sensitivity results from multiple intersecting metabolic events, which provide a central determinant of a person's overall metabolic health. Insulin sensitivity is also the root cause of many diseases. It, therefore, can be targeted to lower chronic disease risk. Impact on insulin levels. One of the primary adaptations to the lack of dietary carbohydrates and the adoption of low-carbohydrate diets is drastically reducing insulin secretion since this hormone is released in response to elevations in blood glucose. Insulin will not be secreted without significant quantities of carbohydrates and subsequent reductions in blood glucose. On average, it has been observed that KDs are likely to reduce fasting insulin concentrations in adults. This is supported by the fact that a very low-calorie diet composed of carbohydrates has been shown to decrease fasting insulin levels in weeks, although with weight loss. Low and very low-calorie diets have significantly reduced insulin levels during an oral glucose tolerance test. Intermittent fasting may have different dynamic effects, not only decreasing fasting insulin levels, but also dampening any oscillatory pattern that exists. An average difference showed a more significant reduction in fasting insulin levels in women than men. A separate analysis supported these findings in obese women, finding fasting insulin levels were reduced and blunted oscillatory patterns after evaluation. Interestingly, The relative changes in fasting and postprandial insulin levels during meal tolerance tests after weeks of alternate day fasting were associated with a concurrent shift in free fatty acid levels or fat oxidation, assessed using indirect calorimetry. Although it is unclear if this is clinically relevant, there are disadvantages to chronically elevated insulin secretion in resistant tissues, such as the liver and adipose tissue, which predispose an individual towards obesity, fatty liver, and metabolic syndrome. Therefore, the potential clearance or improvement in insulin dynamics presented through dietary interventions, such as KD, and intermittent fasting highlights benefits for the metabolic health of individuals. Cellular rejuvenation. Following the previous discussions, this review mentioned cellular rejuvenation. The ketogenic diet and intermittent fasting are well known to promote cellular repair mechanisms, and both practices have great synergistic potential. A common denominator that leads to these cellular rejuvenation actions is the production of ketone bodies, which are induced through fasting or the more prolonged adaptation of a ketogenic diet. The subjective benefits of being deep in nutritional ketosis are euphoria, vitality, clarity, and cognitive sharpness. The precise science behind fasting and its long-term health benefits is relatively new, with the discovery of a lysosomal degradation pathway called autophagy. The cornerstone of nutritional ketosis is its capacity to supply and fuel the brain with molecules known for protecting brain cells and associated with longevity. Ketones have been shown to exert protective effects on neurons in cultures with trophic factors. Moreover, the neuroprotective effects of ketones have been shown to extend to a variety of different CNS challenges, such as hypoglycemic injury, hypoxia, and neurotoxic insults, which can cause seizures or stroke. More recently, ketosis can attenuate the production of reactive oxygen species. This radical can harm cells of the immune system. Since then, data from humans and animals have demonstrated potential mechanisms through which periodic fasting, intermittent fasting, and ketosis are pro-longevity. Evidence from animal models indicates that periodic fasting, as well as prolonged fasting that triggers ketosis, increases lifespan and can treat and slow the onset of several age and disease-related comorbidities, including diabetes, cancer, and cardiovascular disease. The health benefits in fasting were hypothesized to result from cellular rejuvenation, and energy optimization could have evolved as a cellular protection mechanism. Rebranding carbohydrates could indeed increase lifespan, ballooning morbidity in older adults. Different ways of skipping meals can increase longevity through various mechanisms of action that enhance lifespan and health span, enhancing signaling pathways. This indicates that cellular rejuvenation is a significant mechanism of action that contributes to the health benefits of a therapeutic fasting regimen. The consequences of periodic ketosis to promote cellular health is that the practice of intermittent fasting in rats may also enhance the health of the parasympathetic nervous system with its antidepressant-like effects. Intermittent fasting-induced autophagy has been widely studied, but the link between the fasting increased circulating ketone bodies and its autophagy actions is unexplored, mainly and suddenly much sought after. Thus, more research is warranted to discover the direct link between the beneficial effects of ketone bodies, robust ketosis, and autophagy. This knowledge will be central to our future physical, psychological, and cellular health strategies for many of us. Effects on cellular repair. Some of the most clearly demonstrated health improvements are the result of ketogenic diets and intermittent fasting, which are practices that focus on cellular repair. This occurs when one fast and nutrients are scarce, especially dietary protein, which initiates autophagy. Autophagy cleans out damaged cells, destroys them, and allows new ones to regenerate. During fasting, cells enter a mild stress state that can cause them to make more of the molecules needed to support cellular self-repair processes. This increases the production of the molecules necessary to support cellular repair pathways, including anti-inflammatory and antioxidant pathways. Many of these benefits stem from the body's ability to convert energy from glucose to fatty acids and ketones. Several metabolic byproducts of ketone breakdown are antioxidants and specifically support repair pathways in the body. This concept has been established through a series of studies on a nutrient supplement that accelerates repair pathways in the body by feeding a damaged cell when a repair pathway is initiated. In these studies, these nutrients have led to cleaning out of damaged cellular components and programs that support the recycling of enzymes. Observations have opened up a field of research believed to have significant therapeutic potential for preventing age-related diseases. In this new area of study, cellular repair may be essential in helping prevent disease. By selectively improving people's ability to repair cells, this practice, when performed as a fasting mimicking diet, may facilitate recovery and regeneration from injury or illness, including surgery. Mechanisms of fat oxidation, like glucose, multiple biochemical and physiological mechanisms also highly regulate fat oxidation. Hormones like insulin or glucagon can be crucial in controlling the energy substrate used. Insulin facilitates the uptake of nutrients into cells, mainly glucose and fatty acids, by increasing the production of GLUT4, a glucose transporter, in the membranes, and the internalization of the transporter so it can uptake the nutrients. The consequence is that the circulating levels of glucose and fatty acids drop. Once the GLUT2 transporter is no longer being produced and the concentration of circulating nutrients stays low, the body starts using the stored nutrients. As it cannot use glucose, it begins breaking down fat cells to use the free fatty acids, a potent alternative fuel source. In keto-adapted people, hormone changes like this prompt the fat release from cells and increase the beta oxidation of this fat. During fasting or periods where carbohydrate and protein availability are low, liver glycogen reserves are soon depleted, and an adaptation to using fat as a primary energy substrate occurs. Associated with both a fasted state and keto adaptation, in which a more significant proportion of fat is oxidized, are coordinated changes to these enzymes that can metabolize fat. Indeed, several studies demonstrate how various metabolic pathways involved in fat utilization are upregulated in participants following as little as 24 hours of fasting. Consequently, a higher degree of fatty acid mobilization from the adipose tissue occurs, and the fat oxidation rate is increased, eventually forming essentially ketone bodies. The fasted state, resulting in upregulation of mitochondrial efficiency, can be referred to as mitochondrial biogenesis. Mitochondrial efficiency is linked with the ability to transport lactate to mitochondria, the Krebs cycle flux, the ability of oxidative phosphorylation to consume oxygen for the production of ATP, and the resulting respiratory exchange ratio of oxidative phosphorylation. These are the variables that are ultimately measured during respirometric testing. The increase in mitochondrial efficiency results in an increase in ATP production, ranging from 30% to 300%, and similarly a 30 to 300% increase in fat utilization. The human body can change in as little as 10 days, and specific carbohydrate intake increases fat utilization by 3%. Combining the addition of intermittent fasting on top of a ketogenic diet provides an additive effect, leading to an even higher fat adaptation. Most clinical studies of ketogenic diet durations of 12 weeks of fully adapted diets report that the VO2 max respiratory exchange ratio reaches a minimum of 0.68, a proxy for oxygen consumption. Benefits of fat oxidation. Fat oxidation is a key ingredient in the recipe for health and longevity. It should come as no surprise that increasing fat oxidation can be highly beneficial to many conceivable benefits. For example, because fat is a very stored and concentrated energy source, the body can access and use large amounts of energy when it is oxidized. This is often reported as a source or benefit of specific diets and fasting. When energy levels are sustained through a reliable, densely stored source of energy, such as body fat or external fat from a diet, the person can more easily make the life-changing leap away from reliance on high variability glucose, which is less energy dense. When a person relies on a diet that supports the oxidation of body fat or dietary fat, it can result in an easier time managing weight and improving body fat percentage. Measuring and managing different types of fuel use is essential in many biochemical areas of the body, such as exercise physiology and nutrition research, for evaluating the metabolic flexibility of a given person. Metabolic flexibility refers to the speed and potency of the body's ability to switch its energy source from one fuel to another. Regarding dietary interventions, evidence suggests increased fat oxidation in nutritional conditions. Still, more research must determine whether consistent long-term metabolic flexibility changes are observed. Offering tangible proof that support of fat as a fuel leads to metabolic adaptability, giving you the potential to be a more efficient, frequent, and durable fat oxidizer.